You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Hello and welcome to the Tracy Sandler Show, brought to you by FIVO on the Believe Podcast Network. I am your host, Tracy Sandler, and I am very excited to welcome to the show today ESPN Seahawks reporter for NFL Nation, Brady Henderson. Brady, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's good to see you again. I think the last time was the Super Bowl down in Los Angeles. So good to see you.
I think you're right. I think that has been, so it's been quite some time. So it is good to see you as well. Well, we have a week 2 matchup for the ages. I mean, I'm being very dramatic, but your team that you cover, the upstart Seattle Seahawks is what I'm going to call them in this new Geno Smith era, are coming off a big Monday Night Football win over Russell Wilson and the Broncos. Before we get into this week, can you just talk a little bit about that and what the atmosphere was like at Lumen Field, and how surprised were you that the Seahawks pulled off the win?
I did not think that they were going to win just because just because of the quarterback disparity and Russell Wilson. I figured that he would beat Geno Smith. I think the Seahawks roster is better than a lot of people give it credit for. But I just figured that Russell Wilson would beat his former backup, Geno Smith. In terms of the atmosphere, I've covered a lot of games in that stadium that have been very energetic and very raucous, and that was up there. I mean, it felt like a playoff game, and with all the buildup there was with Russell Wilson's return, Monday Night Football, flyover at the start of the game, and it was just from start to finish, really from like 2 hours before kickoff to finish. It was as loud as I can remember it. The press box, when it gets very loud there, it tends to shake and it feels like an earthquake, and that may happen one time a game, like maybe one game or 2 games per season. And it probably happened 4 or 5 times in that game. Wow. It's just so loud, so energetic, and really probably the most memorable regular season game that I've covered there.
Wow, that's amazing. So that must have been quite an experience. So you mentioned Geno Smith and you mentioned the Seahawks roster, and I want to get to both. So we'll start with Geno Smith. I mean, he was a surprise. Is this for real? Is there a chance that he actually continues to play like this and becomes kind of the surprise of the season, or was this just kind of a week 1 overreaction, so to speak?
I mean, he really looked good. And the popular thought on him, and I've kind of had this thought, is that he's going to be at best a game manager, and he's going to be really fighting to keep hold of that job. When he won that quarterback competition over Drew Lock, it really wasn't because he blew everybody away with this stellar and mistake-free play in training camp. It was really neither one of those guys distinguished himself from the other, at least obviously to somebody like me who's just watching. And a big part of that too was that Drew Lock missed time in training camp. He missed a start because of COVID, and I think the competition was already sort of skewed in Geno Smith's favor, and so it kind of felt to me like he really won that competition by default. And it really, because of that, it felt to me and has felt to me like that competition is unofficially carrying into the regular season, and that, Pete Carroll deciding to go with Geno Smith was really him deciding to go with Geno Smith to begin with, and then they'll see. And so, but that said, I mean, Geno Smith was tremendous. And if he plays like that for the rest of the season, then Drew Lock is not seeing the field, and unless Geno Smith gets injured, of course. But I think it remains to be seen if he can do that. I think the big question mark that I have is, can he make a play with a game on the line? And, can he, in his 3 starts last season, and really in the game that he also didn't start, but when he replaced Russell Wilson, when Wilson went hurt in October of last season, that was kind of his issue, is that he played well enough to keep them in all those games. But in the 3 games of those 4 that they lost, he just couldn't make a play at the end, and he couldn't do what Russell Wilson has done so well over his career, which was engineer a game-winning drive. And so he didn't really have to do that in this game on Monday night just because they were leading. But that offense kind of faltered in the second half, and they didn't score a single point. I think I can't remember the yardage total, but they really did not get much going in the second half. So it remains to be seen if Geno Smith can really pull a victory out at the end. But he was tremendous in that game.
It is funny in the NFL because had the Broncos maybe managed the end, had the Broncos definitely managed the end there a little bit better, and not ended up having to go for a 64-yard field goal, the conversation is just entirely
Right.
different all the way around. And that is what's kind of funny about this game, because it wouldn't have changed how Geno Smith played in the game, but that certainly wouldn't be the conversation.
Right. You're exactly right. The conversation would be what the heck happened to their offense in the second half. And the conversation would be that, they only managed 17 points, which, week in and week out, more often than not, that's not going to be enough. You just can't expect your defense to hold another team to 16 points. So you're absolutely right. And, for as good as Geno Smith played, at least in the first half, the Broncos really did the Seahawks a lot of favors in that game between, I think it was 12 penalties. A lot of times I went back and rewatched the game, and it's really struck me how many times they either didn't get the snap off or got it off with like a second left on the play clock. So there was just some really questionable, clock management there, and just the procedural stuff did not seem to be firing. They dropped some passes, and of course the very questionable, which is putting it nicely, decision to kick that field goal at the end there. I mean, we, like you said, we easily could be having a much different conversation right now.
So looking now at week 2, we have the 1-0 Seattle Seahawks versus the 0-1 San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are coming off a game where they committed 12 penalties. They had a very ugly loss. I don't want to shock you, but 49ers Twitter is just up in a tizzy and perhaps overreacting slightly to for the first weekend of the season. But this becomes a matchup that's interesting because, as Kevin Clark has said, the Seahawks can't seem to ever play in a normal game. And when it comes to 49ers and Seahawks, there's never a normal game. It doesn't really matter whose roster is better and who should win the game. It does. Something strange always happens. Even in that 2019 game where the 49ers were by far the better team and they barely won it in the end. So we have an interesting game on Sunday. It's supposed to rain. The 49ers are coming off a pretty bad rain game in Chicago. It's now 84% chance of rain in Santa Clara. I don't really think that affects the Seahawks as much because that is a team that's very used to the rain. But you mentioned earlier that the Seahawks roster is better than a lot of people think. There's obviously the loss of Jamal Adams, which we should talk about. But what on this roster do you think is a surprise? And what do you think the 49ers really have to keep an eye out for?
I would say a surprise just to people who are used to seeing this unit be, average and really get a lot of scrutiny is their offensive line. Mm-hmm. And I guess the surprising part about it is they're starting 2 rookie tackles, and a stat that I keep telling everybody that'll listen to me just because I think it's so fascinating. But they are, they started a rookie left tackle in Charles Cross, who was the 9th overall pick, started a rookie right tackle in Abe Lucas, who's their 3rd round pick. And when they did that on Monday night, they became only the 3rd team since 1970 to start rookie tackles. A pair of rookie tackles in week 1. So it had only happened 2 other times in the last 50 plus years. But they look like they have the potential to be really solid bookends for them for the next decade. And, the offensive line, there was a couple sacks in the second half, but that seemed like that was partly on Geno and not doing a good enough job of stepping up in the pocket and kind of helping his tackles out. So for all of the, long held narrative about how the Seahawks are a terrible pass protecting team, some of which was fair, some of which was a little overblown. I think they've got a chance to have a really good offensive line this season. That could surprise people who are watching it.
Which is funny because that was all Russell Wilson wanted, was them to bolster the offensive line, and he's gone and they do it. So there you go, which is kind of funny. Though I guess when Russell Wilson is your quarterback, you have a little more flexibility there just because of his elusiveness and mobility. So I don't know how much you watched of the game on Sunday against the Bears, but it was, like I said, it was a pretty ugly game. As I said, the 49ers committed 12 penalties. Ironically, we were talking about the 2019 game, Dre Greenlaw, who may very well be the reason they won on Sunday in a less important game, but we'll see how much it matters in January. Could have in some ways been the reason they lost. There were 2 pretty bad penalties there that kept drives alive for the Bears. When you look at this 49ers offense under Trey Lance, what challenges do you think it proposes for a Seahawks defense that will now, though, be without Jamal Adams? And I understand the offense of the 49ers was not particularly prolific the other day, but as you see the potential in going forward into week 2.
Yeah, I think if you ask them, they would say it's just the complexity of the running game and all the different ways that they can attack you there. And now a new way with the quarterback, which gives
Mhm.
them an added dimension that, Jimmy Garoppolo just didn't have with his legs. And so, I think Pete Carroll has said that their running game presents as big of a challenge to them as any run game in the NFL. So I know Elijah Mitchell is hurt, and so
Mhm.
they're going to be facing, I think, a different running back
Yes.
than maybe what they're used to or what they expected to going into this season. But that's got to be the biggest thing. Um, probably more so than Trey Lance beating them with his arm is that run game, which includes Trey Lance possibly beating them with his legs.
So Jeff Wilson will be in there as RB1. You'll have rookies Ty Davis Price and Jordan Mason behind them, who or behind him, that Kyle Shanahan said they're going to have to grow up really fast. It's kind of an interesting situation because last season in week 1, 49ers lose Raheem Mostert early in the game. They lose him for the season. Elijah Mitchell comes in and really steps up. I don't know that Jordan Mason and Ty Davis Price have that ability just yet, but I think for the 49ers, you're going to see a lot of Deebo Samuel in that role. And we saw it a lot on Sunday just because Jeff Wilson is a great running back, and no disrespect to him, but he's not Elijah Mitchell. And the guys behind him are not. The speed goes down dramatically when you go from Elijah Mitchell to Jeff Wilson and then beyond. So I think you're going to see a lot of Deebo Samuel in that role. And you talked about the offensive line of the Seahawks. A big Achilles heel for San Francisco is the interior of their offensive line. And I think every member of that offensive line can play better this week than they played that last Sunday, including Trent Williams, though don't tell him I said that because he's really big, but including Trent Williams. I think every member of that offensive line can play better. But it's going to be kind of an interesting game for San Francisco because with each week, I think the most important thing 49ers fans should be looking at is Trey Lance improving from week to week? We're not going to know who he is at the end of the season. We're certainly not going to know who he is in week 1 and week 2. And week 1 was his third start ever. But is he improving from week to week? We have another potential rain game, and I think that does become an important factor for this 49ers offense. How much will the loss of Jamal Adams help them out?
Yeah, that's a big loss for Seattle. And I know a lot of people are probably skeptical of maybe how big it is just because they saw that he had the pretty underwhelming season last year, and it was underwhelming. He went from 9.5 sacks in 12 games in 2020, made a Pro Bowl, got the big contract extension that next offseason. He went from that to 0 sacks in 12
Mm-hmm.
games, had a couple interceptions, but also some kind of iffy coverage plays. And, the thing that I have consistently heard, or, that I heard all offseason, was that the Seahawks felt like he was really in a position to have a bounce back season. And a big reason for that was their new defense
Mm-hmm.
it's more of an emphasis on split safety looks. It's kind of that, Vic Fangio influence that's really kind of taken the NFL by storm. You see a lot of teams moving towards that. And one of the benefits of that is it makes it harder for quarterbacks to figure out, okay, which guy is the strong safety, which guy is the free safety,
Mm-hmm.
which guy is going to be here in the flat, which guy is going to be playing deep in the post. And it just makes they're more interchangeable, and it makes it harder for offenses to know what they're doing and what's coming. And the thought that I heard in the building was that a big reason why Adams didn't have a sack last season is because there was so much more attention paid to him after that record sack season he had in 2020, and they just weren't creative enough in trying to combat that and trying to put him in advantageous blitzing situations with all that extra attention he was getting. And so the idea was that this new defense was really going to fix that problem. And on the play that he got hurt, you saw him. He had a clean look at the quarterback. He blitzed and he was free there, and he almost brought Russell Wilson down. And then as his body got twisted, his knee landed hard, and I don't know if it got caught up in the turf or whatever, but it sounds like a very serious injury. It has not been confirmed that he's going to miss the season or that he's going to need surgery, but that's really what it sounds like. And so it's going to be a big loss. They've got some nice safety depth in Josh Jones and Ryan Neal. And Neal, in fact, played pretty well a couple years ago when Adams missed 4 games with a groin injury. It does sound like it's going to be Josh Jones who is going to start for him, at least in the meantime. And he was one of their camp standouts. So they've got some pretty good depth there, but neither of those guys are capable of doing what Jamal Adams is capable of doing.
Yeah, it's a big loss for Seattle, and you really just hate to see that for anybody, especially in week 1. So that's unfortunate. Hopefully it won't be this season, but it certainly doesn't sound great. On the 49ers side of the defense, this group has the potential to maybe be the best defense they've seen in a long, I mean, they've had such top defenses, but I think this defense is even better than the 2019 defense if they cannot make really bad penalties that extend drives for the opposite team. But you have Mooney Ward, who, just for you, Brady, and any Seahawks fans, Charvarius Ward's his nickname is Mooney, and he likes to go by Mooney. So if you hear people say Mooney Ward, it is Charvarius Ward. So just FYI,
Okay.
which is helpful for the 49ers because they also have Tarvarius Moore and Jimmy Ward. So it's just, it's helpful to have these nicknames. But you have him back there. They spent a lot of money on him. It's not something they've done at the cornerback position in several years. So they do have a true shutdown corner. With Emmanuel Mosley on the other side, they have a rookie at nickel. They're without Jimmy Ward for a few more games. So, but that front seven and Nick Bosa, of course, is, absolutely fantastic. So for Geno Smith, what challenges will that present for him, and how do you think he'll respond?
Well, I think the interesting thing there is that, for years, the Seahawks passing game was their wide receivers. And, they've had really good running backs who can catch the ball. They've had some productive tight ends. But really, they have not thrown the ball relative to other teams. They have not thrown the ball as much to their running backs and their tight ends. And it's been more about the perimeter guys and, the slot guys as well. But it's been really more of a receiver heavy passing game. And I think that is one thing that's going to change under their new quarterback. And I really think that I still can't put my finger on why they haven't had as good of a screen game as they've had, because they've had really good running backs who can catch the ball. With the tight ends, I do think that a big part of that is the quarterback. And, I've looked at some of the metrics on like the passing plots. And I think a big reason why Russell Wilson, again, it's not like he completely ignored tight ends, but relative to other quarterbacks, if you look at his numbers, they were not throwing the ball to tight ends as much as other teams. And if you look at the passing plot, the middle of the field, like the short middle area of the field, was sort of a dead zone for them. And that's, of course, where tight ends do a lot of their work. And so I think the theory is that, that was sort of a bit of a blind spot for him as a shorter quarterback. It's easier for him to see, the flat and to see the deeper part of the field than it is that short middle part of the field where he's got to see over those offensive linemen who are so much taller than him. So that is one reason why there's been this belief within the Seahawks that their tight ends are going to be a bigger part of their offense this season. And you very much saw that on Monday night. I think it was a combined, 9 catches between Will Dissly, Colby Parkinson, and Noah Fant. That was both of Geno Smith's touchdown passes were to the tight end. So I could see that being, on Sunday and for the rest of the season as well, being a big part of their passing game.
Am I crazy to think that there is a high likelihood the Seahawks win this game?
You're not crazy, no, just because.
I mean, maybe not for that reason, at least.
Yeah, no, just because. I mean, it's look, nothing the Seahawks ever really do surprises me. I've been covering them long enough to know that, like, in the NFL in general, and with this team especially, you can just never say never. And like I said at the beginning of the show, I did not think that they were going to win that game. I am surprised, though, Tracy, that the line is as big as it is. What is it, like 10 points in favor of the 49ers? That surprises me for a couple reasons. One, the Seahawks have really had the 49ers number over the last few years. I guess the counter to that is that, yeah, they also had Russell Wilson for all of that time, and that was obviously a big part of that. The short week, too, probably plays into that. And I imagine, too, that, maybe Vegas is kind of taking into account the possible difficulty of just sort of coming down from all the emotions of Monday night and then trying to get back up, especially on a short week. So it's probably all of that. But that said, 10 points, that's a very big spread. It
is a big spread. And maybe I shouldn't say that I think there's a high likelihood, but I don't think it is out of the realm of possibility, and I think it will end up being a close game. We mentioned the Elijah Mitchell injury. At the moment, the 49ers have 2 other injuries to watch. George Kittle and Daniel Brunskill did not practice on Wednesday at the time we're recording this. We don't know yet if they're going to practice on Thursday, but the loss of George Kittle becomes big in all the ways because he's George Kittle, but of course it's a big deal in the passing game, and it's a big deal in the run game because he's such an important blocker. So and with the already shaky interior of the offensive line, that becomes really, really important for San Francisco. They also have Daniel Brunskill with a hamstring injury, who, as I mentioned, so he potentially is not playing on Sunday. So if you have those guys out, it will be, I think, tougher. And I don't think you can discount both of those injuries, especially then you add in Elijah Mitchell. And all of a sudden in week 2, the 49ers find themselves without a number of key players on offense. So it'll be an interesting one to watch. How much do you think the rain does factor in? I think it's certainly factored in the other day, but my counterpoint to that always is both teams are playing in the rain. So when people say, well, and then the monsoon hit and then it was raining and then it got hard, well, the other team had to play in the rain too. So, that becomes a tough one. But how much of a factor do you think that actually makes?
I think it will certainly impact the game, but I don't know if it'll be as big of an advantage for one team or over the other as it would be, if this was San Francisco playing, a very pass heavy team, or the Seahawks playing a very pass heavy team, just because I just generally think that rainy conditions, sloppy conditions favor the team that is better at running the ball, just because it's hard to throw the ball in those conditions. But both of these teams kind of want to win the same way, which is not really relying on their quarterback to throw 40 times a game and relying more on their running game. So, both of those running games are not going to be at full, or at least the 49ers isn't going to be at full strength. I think the Seahawks, maybe it does benefit them just because their backfield sounds like it's got a chance to be at full strength. Rashad Penny is healthy. He's their starter, and they've also got their rookie second-round pick. Sorry, my computer is making a ton of noises right now. Their rookie second-round pick, Ken Walker. He did not play in the opener because he had a hernia procedure about a month ago, but sounds like he's got a chance to play on Sunday. He practiced on Wednesday as a full participant, really for the first time since he had that procedure. So their backfield could be at full strength, and in conditions like that, that could be more important than ever.
I do have a fun fact for anybody listening who say, because people have said this, that the 49ers abandoned the run game in the second half, and that's why they lost. They ran the ball 37 times total, 18 times in the first half and 19 times in the second half. So they certainly did not abandon the run game. It's just without Elijah Mitchell, it was much less effective. So it will be interesting to see on Sunday if they are able to rectify that. And, Kyle Shanahan always says if they win the game, if they are able to run the ball more than 30 times a game, they do have a high chance of winning. It just did not work out the other day. So we will see how this plays out. These games are always so entertaining and so weird, and something bizarre always happens in them. So I'm going to put you on the spot. I'll do it too. Do you want to give me a game prediction and a score prediction? I'll do it too, even though my score predictions are always terrible.
Sure. In terms of exact score, so I think the 49ers are going to win, but I don't think it's going to be by 10 points. That seems high to me. So I will say 21-17.
Okay. And I'm going to actually pick the 49ers to win, and I was going to go 20-17.
Okay. So we're both pretty close.
We are very close there. Now, real quick aside, it's Friday, and on the show on Friday, we normally do Cody Corner because Cody Bellinger is my guy. So I just want to do a quick little Cody Corner and just Dodgers Quarter. The Dodgers are NL West champions, you guys, and I'm very excited about it. Brady, 49ers fans hate that I talk about the Dodgers, but it's just kind of I am who I am. So this is my little ode. They are NL West champs. You should prepare yourselves, guys, in October. We're going to be doing a lot of Dodgers on this. Cody Bellinger has had a much better week than he's had in a very long time, so I want to acknowledge that. And that's all I'll say for now. See, you guys, that wasn't that painful after all. Are you a baseball fan, Brady?
I'm not. I used to be a diehard Mariners fan, and then 20 seasons of ineptitude and really poor management and all that really kind of turned me off. So I'm kind of like that guy in Major League, that fan who's just totally cynical, and that it's going to take a deep playoff run to get me back.
All right. Well, that's fine. Maybe they'll be able to do that for you sometime. Brady, thank you so much for joining me today. This was awesome.
Yeah, you bet, Tracy. That was fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if you guys like what you heard, and I know you did, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Follow us on Instagram at Fangirl Sports Network. We are brought to you by BetOnline. We are brought to you by FIVO. And with that, I'll talk to you guys next week when the 49ers are either 0-2 and you're losing your minds, or they're 1-1 and you think they're going to the Super Bowl. Bye, all.